Well, all right, we're online with our hybrid three ways program here. So hello everybody. So great to have with us Brian Daldorph. I'll go ahead and hold up his book. Oh no, the camera's over there. Words is a Powerful Thing. It's a Kansas Notable book for 2022, and we're so happy to have him here to talk about it. Also joining us is Todd Lehman, the Executive Director of Offender Victim Ministries. And I think this is going to be a really great conversation about what both of you do and how we can help the incarcerated people in our community. So before I turn it over to you, I always like to put in a few plugs for what's coming up at the library. So real quick, let's see here. Starting on September 10th, Saturday, September 10th, at 9:30 a.m. and then continuing every Saturday through October 15th. There are going to be free fitness classes on the lawn here in the park outside the library. And it's sponsored by the Newton YMCA and the Healthy Harvey Coalition. And the library is providing free kids activities during the pop-up fitness. So you can come and exercise and leave your kids with Sharon or Sarah or Tamara, and they'll have some fun. I'd probably do something fitness related or something else. We also have a new thing, Crafternoon, starting on Saturday, September 10th, going to be 2 to 5 p.m. You can bring your own craft to work on, or we will have adult coloring. I guess the only other thing, there's much more on our website. The only other thing I'll say is that on October 4th, that's a Tuesday, October 4th, we have Travis Haying, the Wichita Eagle photojournalist, and he created a documentary called Once Was Lost that it won a Heartland Emmy, and it's also part of the Tallgrass Film Festival. And Travis is going to bring that film here for a screening, and followed by Q&A. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, October 4th. So come and watch the movie and meet Travis. With that, I guess Brian, were you going to start, and then sure. we'll just it's a small group, so we'll just do it free form and oh good. Oh, we've had more people. We've got a pretty good crowd on Zoom actually. So thank you all for joining us. And those of you on Zoom, if you want to join the conversation, type in the chat or use the Q&A button. And also those of you on Facebook, I'll be monitoring the Facebook chat so we can all interact and it'll be great. And let's see, I did email out to those of you on our email list the handout the people in the room here have. So you can click on that, and I will pull up that link and put that link in the chat as well, so that you can access that and follow along. All right.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me here. Nice to come to Newton. Haven't been here before, so thank you for that. So the book that I wanted to talk about and the work that I wanted to talk about is this. The book is called Words is a Powerful Thing, and I wrote it about the work that I've done at Douglas County Jail in Lawrence, just outside Lawrence. And I led a creative writing class there for 20 years. Started in 2001, and the class was shut down in March 2020 with COVID. But apart from that, I'd been going to the jail most every week. And in the end, there were a group of us who were involved with this class. And it was a great experience. I've had a lot of different types of teaching experience, but this was my best experience for many different reasons. It just seemed like the work I was doing there was just so significant to the people that we were working with, the incarcerated guys there. And I think that the best way that I can illustrate the sort of writing that was done there, the sort of things that came out of the class, would be to read just a few samples of the writing that some of the guys did over the years that really stood out for me. So this is in the handout that you were sent, but I'll just read through these different voices here. And I think just from hearing these lines, you'll get a sense of how important the class was to the guys who would come every week, and how much they kind of put themselves into the writing that they did in the class. So again, this is on your handout, so you can follow on the handout. There are 6 or 7 different voices here. When you arrive, read the sign. Leave all hopes and dreams behind. Forget all you have or had in the free world. It no longer matters. It will only distract you, and you'll become prey to the lions in this jungle. Trust no one. Everyone is out for something in this cutthroat society. I write because it unclutters my mind, purges the negativity, and replenishes peace while holding my demons at bay. After so long in here, and so many hours upon days upon weeks locked in a cell, the more claustrophobic I've become. It's a mental challenge every time I step through that door, and they think I'm trying to be defiant. I watch as time slowly chews away on men's sanity, where confusion reigns supreme. Soon now the jail awakens to do its time. It seems better at that than we. I think it's because the cold walls got timed down because they know they will never be free. I fail at most everything until my pen unwinds. Words unveil through mists of time in my mind. I may not shine or even get what's mine, but when these words come together, they're one of a kind, my little mark in the world. And then the final quotation, just to begin here. I'm so different from you. Well, I've been down, don't get me wrong, trying to turn a beautiful disaster into a beautiful song. I'm so different from you. Dreams and prayers fill my heart, giving me hope so I don't tear apart. I'm so different from you. And that last one was written in the last class that we had before the program was shut down in March 2020. And then when I give a presentation like this, there are a number of points that I wanted to make, and I've numbered them on the handout that I gave out here. So one of the questions about the work that we were doing in the jail is this one, the second point here. How does this writing relate to someone who hasn't been incarcerated, doesn't know anyone who has been inside the walls? So one of the questions is, how does any of the writing that was done in the class, how does that relate to somebody who hasn't been incarcerated and doesn't know this whole world? And I think that the best answer to that was in the words of Sister Helen Prejean, who has really done this sort of work all of her life. And she wrote in the foreword to a book called Doing Time, 25 Years of Prison Writing. When I read anything, I'm always hoping the writer will take me into realms of experience I wouldn't otherwise have. Experiences that push the edges of human life and our ways of doing things, put me up against myself and make me ask, what would I do in this situation? Who would I become? Adventure stories are like that. Prison writings are like that. Come with me, these convict writers say. I'll take you into my world. Hang on, it's quite a ride. And I think that art and literature in general does this. It takes you into a different type of experience. And if it works well, then you can relate to what's happening in the novel or the movie or whatever, or in the poetry, and you can relate it to your own life. And I certainly found that in doing this work and working with the incarcerated writers, that I could definitely relate to very much of what they were saying, even though it wasn't my direct experience. And then I wanted to just give some context for the class and how it fits into the US criminal justice system and the significance of education and writing programs for incarcerated people. So again, there are some notes here about that, which I've used in the book. I think everybody knows that we have a massive system of incarceration in this country, spend a huge amount of money on it. And I think the general conclusion that's drawn by many different people is that the system doesn't work very well and that the resources could be better spent in many different ways. And that, if there is something that kind of works in this system, it is education. And that sort of gives people who are incarcerated the best chance of kind of getting their lives back on track. So the jail that I taught at in Douglas County, one of over 3,000 jails and almost 2,000 state and federal prisons that make up the huge American correction system. 3,000 jails and 2,000 prisons. The statistics for incarcerated people in this country generally are at around the 2 million mark. So a massive system drawing in a lot of people, and it's a system that, in many ways has created a lot of problems too. Between 1980 and 2010, the number of incarcerated Americans rose from approximately 500,000 to almost 2.5 million. And most scholars attribute this to the government wars on crime and drugs of that period. And so there was this massive expansion in the prison population. One of the kind of guiding lights for the work that I did, and somebody who has supported this work and wrote an endorsement for the book, is Jimmy Santiago Baca, who's one of the best known formerly incarcerated writers. And he said about the US prison system, "We are all connected to a national madness that absurdly expects prisoners to change for the better as we deep freeze them in 6x9 cells. We seek to reduce crime while we do everything in our power to create it." Baca then argues for the worth of inmate writing programs that can bring about substantial changes for the better, as happened in his own situation. He says that through the redemptive act of writing, inmate writers announce to the world beyond the walls and bars that a spark of life still burns in them. Through writing, they might become meaningful human beings in a society that has branded them as nothing more than worthless criminals. And then I'll go to point number 4. And I'd like to just read this quotation from Eldridge Cleaver in his book, Soul on Ice, which I think was published in the 1960s. And this is how he described his response to incarceration. "My pride as a man dissolved, and my whole fragile moral structure seemed to collapse, completely shattered. His response to this shattering was one I have seen many times in my years at Douglas County Jail as an instructor." And Cleaver says, "That is why I started to write, to save myself. I realized that no one could save me but myself." The prison authorities were both uninterested and unable to help me. I had to seek out the truth and unravel the snarled web of my motivations. I had to find out who I am and what I want to be, what type of man I should be, and what I could do to become the best of which I was capable. And then I just wanted to read a number of the poems that came out of the class, because again, I think this is the best way to kind of illustrate what we were doing in the class. And so again, these are in the notes that I gave out beforehand. And the The first one is a poem called Addiction by one of the writers in the class. I'm writing this about sickness, or maybe it's a disease better known as an addiction. It causes a chain of events that lead to a definite end of freedom, of life, of happiness, loss in general. Friends, family possessions, you name it. The first to go is your looks, or is it your sanity? Maybe it's your wealth. It's hard to say, it all happens so fast. Does it really matter the order in which one falls apart? It's not like it's an art, the way we tear ourselves apart. Where do I start? First, I'd say we start forgetting to eat, to wash our feet. Then as time starts to pass, we forget to wash our ass. Next, you'll be lying on the floor wishing you had some more. Refusing to answer the door, then you're out in the street wishing you had something to eat. And this affliction, I realize, is an addiction, has caused a disease I'm starting to know. It's a sickness. I hope I die with quickness. One of the guys that I worked most closely with is Antonio Sanchez Day. He had been incarcerated for 13 years. And then I met him, he was in Douglas County Jail, and he was determined to turn his life around. And he wanted to do that through his writing. He was extraordinarily gifted as a writer. He was both, he was native Hispanic and drew on both of those cultures in his writing. And even though a lot of the material that we dealt with was kind of bleak, as you would imagine in a place like a jail where there's a lot of suffering, a lot of misery for obvious reasons, he could also find the joy in his experience too. And so I like to include this poem. It's called A Poet's Heart. Lines composed on writing paper, comprised of words scribbled on various pieces of paper, scrap paper, court papers, jailhouse request forms, receipts, even napkins, depict the legacy of this wounded heart that, despite its constant anguish, still pumps life. A heart that beats to the rhythm of Mother Earth's drums, a heart that flashes like lightning across the darkest skies, a heart that burns with desire and does not extinguish in the hardest of rain or strongest of winds, a heart with the insatiable hunger of this starving artist, a heart that was once frozen, that now flows like streams into rivers, into oceans, into the sea of life. This heart is the heart of the poet. And then I'll finish and pass over to Todd with this poem, again by Shane, who was one of the keenest writers in the class. I saw him over quite a number of years. He would serve a short sentence and then he would leave, and then soon enough he would come back. Had a lot of problems that he never got really sorted out. But he was one of the keenest writers in the class, and he would come to class with a big stack of his new poems. And the word around was that he would just sit in his cell writing all day. And it was really this great stuff. It's kind of raw, as you'll see, but it was just so well written and so distinctive. And every time he came to class, we were always kind of wondering what he'd been writing. And I think I like this poem because it just kind of shows the turnover of guys coming into the jail, going out, coming back in again, just this kind of revolving door of the jail system. But he found his way to deal with that, and that was through his writing. It's called The Replacements. The replacements come in, first one, then another. Some wear this uniform as I do, some wear the other. Some walk in and the door slams shut. Some stay quiet, others kick and scream. Some post bail and for a time are let out of jail. Others stay where they lay. And if you were to ask, they'd probably tell you, this is the life I chose, but did I choose it or did it choose me? I'm not saying this was my destiny or even my fortune, but maybe it was my fate. Not that it was meant to be, but this was the hand I was dealt, and I could either rot where I lay or let the streets carry me away. So I ran from one to the next with a pocket full of need and a heart full of greed. It wasn't long. I was caught in a trap and there was no turning back. Every time I tried to walk away, the streets, they called me back. The creativity faucet is still on, and we are all dripping wet in poetry. I was welcomed with an open heart, and that's how I got my start. And the last chapter of my book, in which I was kind of summing up the program and talking about the way that it ended in 2020, I used this line from Shane as the title of the chapter. The creativity faucet is still on, and we are all dripping wet in poetry. Because that's what the class was really. It was an opportunity for people in a pretty bad situation to express their creativity, to try to come to terms with their situation and their experience, and to try to get to a better place. And I think that's what we were trying to do overall. And, you know, I think that we were able to help a number of people with this, and that really seemed like an important thing to do for us. So that's what I wrote about and tried to tell that story in the book. So that's what I have to say to begin with, and I'll pass things over to Todd now. And thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Hey, let me scoot the camera over. Yeah, Todd, would you like to maybe just, and then we can open things up, maybe tell us a bit about what you do and what Offender, oh, I came the wrong way. Okay, here's Todd. What Offender Victim Ministries is all about.
Sure. Offender Victim Ministries is a larger organization, and one of the elements that we work with is from our prison ministries program. So that's kind of where our overlap is here this evening. So I think I'll speak primarily from that program perspective. We do have, so like Brian was saying, we also had been locked out of the prison from March 2020, and then we were able to get back in April of 2022. Our volunteers could go back in. And so we have several different programs that engage inmates. One is actually fairly similar to what Brian
as we were talking about before.
Yeah, what Brian has been describing here of for us, it requires volunteers with a particular skill, because they would go in and lead writing classes, whether that was a poetry session or creative writing. They would be leading the inmates through that creative process, and as a way of creating an outlet, an expressive outlet for the men. We all, within the drama or the prison arts piece, there's also a drama component that we partner with Bethel College. So every so often, and actually just this past summer, there was a program created and community was invited to come in to the prison. And so I should also back up. When I say the prison, I'm talking about the KDOC facility in Hutchinson. And most of our, so we were both in the central unit and in the east unit for these various programs. So aside from the writing and the drama, there's also at times, if we have a skilled volunteer to lead choral music, there's a choir opportunity, and then there's some pretty awesome jailhouse rock that can turn up in the form of sacred choral music. So we give opportunities for the men in the prison to express themselves in that way, and to be in a space that's different than their normal daily existence. We also take volunteers inside the prison and match them one-on-one or two volunteers with an inmate to simply sit at a table like this and visit for an hour. And that happens, if a volunteer commits to that, is once a month, and just gives an inmate who doesn't get visits otherwise an opportunity to connect with a human being at a human level. Interesting how those themes emerge in the writing that Brian was sharing with us, the theme of not being able to be seen for who they are, having to be protective and kind of put their shell on so that others can't get at the real them, because that's dangerous for their own sense of being. So yeah, we have opportunities for folks in the community to get inside the prison and to experience what life is like for one particular inmate, as they learn to know that one inmate over time. That takes very little skill. The M2 Match 2 program takes very little skill if you can sit and carry on a conversation. And for some of the inmates, it's really just asking a question and being a good listener.
Yeah.
And following up with a question and being a good listener. Just to give, again, an opportunity for expression, and sometimes they just want to be able to talk about themselves, because we all like to do that, and they just don't get that opportunity outside of these visits. And when I say inmates are not getting visits, if they are in this M2 program, one of the ways they qualify to be in the program and available to a volunteer is that they get 6 or fewer outside visits over the course of a year. So you can imagine we probably can't imagine being in a prison in that kind of environment and having no connection with the outside world, no outlet for expression.
Yeah. One thing that I heard all the time was that when you are incarcerated, people sort of fall away from you, and they promise that they're going to stay in touch and write letters and come and see you. And then over the time period, they don't. They kind of lose connection with you. And so, I mean, one of the most common things that people are dealing with is just isolation. And so a program like yours, bringing people in, must be just so important for people in that situation.
Yeah, and we also have an opportunity when I'm talking about going to the prison, that requires physically getting there and getting inside and being there. But there are also, of course, inmates who don't get visitors, but who are interested in writing letters. We have connecting back with the writing piece, we have a pen pal program that we offer for volunteers. And then we will connect a volunteer who's willing to write a letter, occasionally with an inmate who's on death row in one of a number of facilities throughout the country. And we'll help facilitate sending the letters, receiving the letters at various levels of comfort in terms of using one's own personal address or not. It doesn't matter. We'll help that happen. To give an inmate an opportunity to express themselves and learn that someone out in the world is interested in them as a person. Those are some of the opportunities that we have. People with particular artistic skills and people who are just interested in having a can of pop and a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Neat. Well, I see Lori on Facebook. She put in, how do I sign up to be one of these volunteers, and can I have more than one inmate? So we got some. Lori's interested. I think Offender Victim Ministries. If you Google it, right, you can get to the website and the contact info. And
the easy way to Google it is OVM Newton. Yeah. And then our website will be near the top, and there's information in there, and underneath our programs and our prison ministries. Or there's also our phone number, so feel free to call us and at the office, and we'll certainly help you go through the steps that are needed.
Yeah, that's
and the question about more than one inmate, we do have a few volunteers right now who go and visit on different nights of the month, and so they are visiting with, in some cases, two different inmates. It's a possibility.
Yeah. Well, that's that's really neat. So let's see here. Yeah. So folks, you go ahead and feel free to, like I said, type your questions. But I guess and thanks so much for that info, Todd. I guess I'm gonna go back to Brian for a minute. Could you I guess tell me, I'm curious because I write poetry myself, and I actually the library, another plug for the library I'm putting in, but the library just started a monthly poetry night club where we get people together to share poetry and read poetry. So I'm curious, how do these classes work? Like what does a class session look like? And do you ask people to do things between classes or yeah?
Yeah. So I do write about this in my book, sort of I wanted to talk about the way that I did it, but I also wanted to, offer that as a suggestion for people who are doing something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started this class, that was in 2001, I was used to teaching at a college level and doing like a creative writing workshop. And the way that you usually do that is to have a class in which the students submit poetry, and then we discuss it and critique it and make suggestions about it, and they go off and revise it and try to sort of write a better poem. So it's a workshop in that sense. That's what I thought I would be doing at the jail when I started in 2001. But the class really turned into something else, and it sort of developed its own character. And what it became really was more like a forum for people to present their work. And so the class would usually have about maybe 15 guys in it, sometimes more than that, sometimes less than that. And what they would do, sometimes they would bring work to the class. We divided the class into 3 sections. The first section, we read through what we had done the previous week, because I would type it up and give them handouts like this with their work on it from the previous week. And they liked that. It was like a publication. They were excited to see that their poem was there. They'd get mad if I made a typo, but I did my best. And so the first thing we would do would be to read the poems from the previous week. And that gave us a kind of, just kind of linked us with everything that we'd done before. So that was the first part of the class, and we would read the poems. The second part of the class, we would do some writing together. And the way that I did that was to write a series of prompts on the board in the classroom, and then everybody would write for about 10 or 15 minutes. In fact, some of the poems that I read tonight came out of that. Usually we would write for about 15 minutes there, and that was probably about as much as we could do, because then some of the guys would sort of lose concentration. And then the final part of the class would be reading what we had written in the class. And there were just some wonderful moments of some of these very gifted writers reading things that they had just written, and they were kind of amazing. Like the last class we had at the jail before it was closed down, there was a young guy in the class, looked about 18. I'd never seen him before, quiet kind of guy. And he wrote in the class, don't know if he'd done it before, don't know his story or anything, but he wrote this final example that I read at the beginning of the presentation. He wrote, "I'm so different from you. Well, I've been down, don't get me wrong, trying to turn a beautiful disaster into a beautiful song. I'm so different from you. Dreams and prayers fill my heart, giving me hope so I don't tear apart. I'm so different from you." And it was quite a long poem. That was just a part of it. And so that would be the third part of the class. In answer to your question, sometimes the guys would bring in things that they wanted to read, and we would usually have time for that towards the end of the class. Like Shane, one of the writers that I've read tonight, he would bring in a stack about this big of his new poems because he'd been writing all week in his cell and he wanted to read like 10 poems to the class. Well, we didn't have time for that, but he would be writing all of the time. And so we did some writing in class, and then some of the guys, because they really got into this and thought it was important and wanted to do more of it, then they would write in their own time as well and then bring the things to class. So that's how we did it in the class for the most part.
Yeah, and the addiction poem, I'm trying to think who it reminded me of, like maybe like Gil Scott-Heron or something like that, with the jam rhymes all over the place. It's really
could be. He could set it to music.
And I could imagine like the bass and bongo drums and him like laying it down over that or something. So.
And we did have a lot of musicians who came through the class. A lot of rap artists who did great stuff. We had singers in the class who would stand up there and sing a song, and that was great too. So we would sort of encourage creativity in whatever form it took.
Yeah. Oh, and Rhonda on Facebook says, "Thanks for keeping the heart of the poet alive, Antonio." So Rhonda was somebody who came to the jail class and knew Antonio very well. That's really cool. And I'm going to keep asking questions, but feel free everybody to jump in. I guess.
May I jump in?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You jump in, please.
I was curious if you would notice over time a difference in the men as they came, maybe in their first week or their first couple of weeks, compared to what it was like for them, or how their confidence level or their demeanor, what it would have been like down the road from there. Were there any? Could you notice that, or was it pretty much?
Very much so, because a lot of the guys that we worked with had never done this before, never done anything like this before. And most often their attitude to what they were writing was like, no one would be interested in this. This is just like my story. It's, why would anybody else be interested in this? But then when we realized that they were saying something that was important and interesting and meaningful, that would encourage them. And they would come back next week and they would want to do it and sort of get more and more involved in it. So we certainly saw that. But one thing that we also saw was that quite often when guys came in, they were in a pretty bad physical state. They'd often been using drugs, not living very well, and just oftentimes their sort of physically they were sort of stronger as they sort of got themselves sorted out in a way. So we often saw that as well.
It sounds like a form of journaling.
Yeah.
So that when you journal, sometimes you're not even aware about what you're going to write. It just kind of flows through.
Sure.
And then once you're finished, then you go back and you read. And sometimes if you read like 3 months previously, then it's like, oh, I wrote that. And then it's like discovering that concept all afresh, all over again.
Yeah.
And particularly for people that are herded about and personal connection isn't really encouraged much in a prison situation. This is particularly important to hold on to their sense of humanity, I would think.
Very much so, yes. That's something that we saw over and over, because basically, the prison system is a kind of dehumanizing institution. That's just what it is, and what it has to be in a way, because that's just what it's kind of made as. And I think that this type of writing and the sort of things that Todd was talking about with the work that he does, it does give people a chance to be human, in a way that oftentimes the system doesn't really let them do anything like that, you know. And just you mentioning doing plays and doing choral music and whatever. I mean, I just know how guys that I work with would just light up with that, you know. That would just be something to kind of keep going for, really. Yeah.
Yeah. See, Rhonda on Facebook says, stereotypes seem so embedded in our society, and thanks for your work, Brian, and your book to help change those stereotypes. What can the rest of us do to help change the existing attitudes? And probably the speaker would for both of you to talk about.
Yeah, first, our own attitudes have to be changed. And so I'd say put yourself in a position where your stereotype can be challenged. And if that means working up the gumption to go into a prison with a group of other volunteers, but take that opportunity. It's only scary for a time or two, and then it's an opportunity to really challenge those stereotypes that we don't necessarily even recognize that we hold within us.
Mm.
Yeah, because that's where I would start.
Yeah. You mentioned something there. I mean, is it a scary thing to go into a jail? Would you like to talk about that?
Well, for most people, it is at least the first time.
I can address that. I'm one
Laura,
of his volunteers.
Oh, right.
Laura has been in.
Oh,
Yes, and I just started when we opened in April,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and it is true, because it looks like a fortress, and everybody's in protective riot gear, pretty much. And it is a little bit casting your fate to the wind as you walk through all the double doors and
Sure.
and so we had to be trained, and we all had ID cards. So it was a long process just to get in there and then actually meet our match.
Did you have a background check too?
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that good stuff.
Hmm.
And I was matched with the young man. There for 11 years, and he was only 27. And had any visitors for over a year. So talk about expectations and preconceived notions. He was not anything like I expected at all.
And yet he'd spent just about half of his life incarcerated.
That's right, and I was very impressed with that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, to walk in and hear the gate close
Big
behind
slam.
you, and you realize
Mm.
that's also your way out, but you're walking away
Yeah.
from it, and
Yeah.
now you're inside the system. That is the thing that will make. But there have been a number of college students who annually will, when the prison is open, will sign up to be volunteers. And college students often share more freely than those of us who are older and don't want to be quite so vulnerable. College students mention that a lot, that the first time or two of hearing that gate slam.
Yeah.
And they are stuck.
And also you go through a lot of doors in
Yeah.
my experience. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I would say, with Newton Public Library here, we're just catty corner to the Harvey County Jail. And, of course, I won't get into specific people, but we do have people come here, just released from jail seeking resources. And,
Sure.
and, I can see that they're shaken. I mean, it's like they, it's just, I can only imagine what it would feel like. It seemed like what was it the Jimmy, it was one of the people that you read that talked about it was the Eldridge Cleaver talked about how he was shattered and his whole moral structure and his pride as a man were gone. And it does seem like even a short stay in a county jail, say you got a DUI or something and you spend the night in jail, that can really shake a person to the core, so.
It's a tough experience.
Yeah.
It is a tough experience. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, You know, we know that people have done, you know, committed crimes oftentimes to be there, but still, it is a tough experience, and you know, I feel kind of sympathetic with that. I can understand that, you know.
And what was it? Let me go back to the Facebook, see if any more coming. But what was it? I mean, I'm sure you talk about this in your book, but you did this for 19 years or 20 years? Yeah, 20 years it says, and then COVID happens. And what was that like for you? What was that like for your students? If you could even communicate with them to what they were experiencing?
It was really hard. I mean, you know, COVID hit everybody so hard, but for incarcerated populations, it was devastating. You know, not only the sort of actual danger of it, but just the way that it closed people down even more, as if, you know, it wasn't tough enough already. It made it even harder to get by. And yeah, so, you know, they lost their programs, and they were sort of even more isolated from society in that situation. So yeah, it was a really hard blow on people who were doing really badly already. That's what we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, volunteers coming into a jail, as Todd was talking about, it really is a lifeline, and quite a lot of people there are sort of cut off from their families and from their friends, and they are very isolated there. And just somebody coming in and talking to you is something to sort of keep you going. It really is. And I've seen that time and time again, you know, just somebody who will take an interest in you and ask you questions and listen to what you have to say. That is absolutely vital, and it can really just keep somebody going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question I have is what, but I suppose both of you could address this. What have been some of the, what's it been like working with the administrations of these facilities? Maybe things that you asked to do that they weren't willing, or things that they offered that were great, you know?
COVID was the point of a lot of frustration at the administrative level.
Mm-hmm.
Because we couldn't get answers. And we didn't know if the administrators themselves didn't have the answers, didn't know, but we just couldn't seem to kind of grasp how to look forward, or until finally the word, you know, just one day all of a sudden, okay, the prison is open again, and it was out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time. It's like, oh wow. Mm-hmm. So it was frustrating working with the administrative level, just trying to get answers to questions to help our volunteers who were feeling the loss of not being able to go inside, and who were curious, how's their guy doing with no communication.
Yeah.
But I started with the negative. That's really been our biggest negative experience. The prison in Hutch has been so good to work with, and such a valuable partner for so many years for OVM and the M2 program especially. They're responsive when we have questions. They're responsive when we have last minute changes. They're understanding. I mean, they've just been so good to work with, and I have a really positive feeling about the folks in that prison who are our main contact.
And that's working with different people at the prison. You're saying that? I mean, it's kind of general.
There are a few key administrative folks that we connect with.
Yeah.
But there's several of them, and they were not the ones that I had the frustration. I felt the frustration with, because they also were sort of in the dark.
Yeah.
in a lot of those decisions also.
Well, I think especially with COVID, everybody was struggling, and
yeah.
I mean, because jails and prisons were hit so hard that you know, the administrators must have found it very difficult to know what to do in that situation. Yeah. Now, for the most part, with our program, we have been supported by the administration. They realize that we're a pretty good thing. We're kind of a safety valve. We sort of get guys out of their pods and doing something productive, and kind of enabling them to use a kind of positive energy instead of all of the kind of negativity that's around a sort of jail situation. So for the most part, we were supported, and yeah, they let us do this for a long time, and for the most part, we didn't have any trouble with it. So again, for the most part, yes, I mean, the administration realized that we offered them something pretty good, and they were willing to support us in what we did.
Do you feel like your project, we'll call it a project right now, it's not a great term, that your project is done, or are you on hold right now?
Well, I mean, I didn't want it to be finished, and I didn't know how it would ever finish, because I just thought I would go there forever. Thursday, 1 o'clock, I would be there, because I did that for so long. But COVID was COVID stopped that, as it stopped many things. Just as it happened, I was finishing my book at the time, and in a way, this kind of sums up what I've done. But I would go right back there tomorrow if we were allowed back in. But it doesn't look like we will be in the near future. I mean, that's just what I've heard from those sources. So it does look like this particular project, as you called it, is finished, but who knows?
And that's obviously the state prisons are under KDOC, and then the Douglas County Jail would be under the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, I guess. So
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
Well, that's.
But could you say more about why, at this point, they're not allowing you back into the jail?
Well, yeah. So they've cut right back on all of their programs, and for one reason is that they find it very difficult to recruit corrections officers, and that's, I think, statewide. I mean, Laura Kelly has addressed that, and that is a problem. It's a tough job. It's not great pay, and you work long hours, and it is difficult to keep people working in these situations. And so that's the main reason that they give, and they've cut right back on programs because of that, because they say that they just can't staff it. And so that's what we've heard. That's the main thing that we're told about it.
Yeah, and I know in Hutchinson, staffing is a challenge as well.
Yeah, it's a really tough job. Everybody knows that, and not a lot of people want to do it, really, and so it is difficult, I think.
It does seem like things that make these institutions less dehumanizing would also seem to make the job of a corrections officer more appealing.
I wish that they would see it like that.
Yeah.
But often the administration would more see it as a kind of extra responsibility that they don't have the manpower for. So they're not going to let you do this program. So yeah, I mean, I wish that they would think about it in that way, that we're doing something good that kind of helps them, rather than that we're just one more thing that they just can't really handle this week.
Because they have to have a guard in your classroom or something like that?
No, they don't do that. But they do have to. They do have to bring the guys to the classroom. We used to be able to do that, but then the administration decided, no, they're not going to let volunteers do that anymore. And so now a guard has to take the guys into the classroom. And so that would be, another responsibility that they didn't really want to take on.
Yeah. Well, and you read this, I've read stories about the insane amounts of mandatory overtime, and it does seem, so that's That's just it's just a tangled situation. It seems like a lot of wrong or non-ideal practices that are meshing together to create this. I don't know if you. That's my take on it.
Wonder what would happen if we'd have a statewide draft where we'll just say young men at this point, but young men have to serve their 2 years as a prison guard,
Corrections officer.
corrections
Yeah.
officer.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. It's an interesting thought experiment, you know, like how would society react to that, and how might things change?
It would open some eyes. It certainly would.
So I was in college in the 60s. And what I noticed when we went to the prison is you look at just the buildings and it's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And they weren't keeping up with the repairs, right? You could see where, I mean, just general maintenance that would be okay anywhere else, it's okay there. So I know that I've observed the guards thinking to myself, if I feel that this surrounding is dehumanizing, imagine I had to come to work here every day, right? And that the stuff's falling apart, the paint's peeling, the ceiling tiles have stains and they're leaking, and so, how would I feel working there?
And you're working with people who are not happy for the most part, because
Yeah.
they're in a bad situation.
So first of all, you kind of think about, well, what kind of person would that job attract, right? And then you look at just rats in a maze. I mean, it can't be a good situation the way they're running it. And you would think that the more programs they offer to give the prisoners their sense of humanity would encourage them or give them motivation to make those changes. So for those prisoners that are there for a limited time set, what's going to happen? Like the young man that I was speaking to, he had no idea what was going on in the last 11 years. Do you know what social media has done? I mean, all these things in our society that we all take for granted now. And this young man doesn't have a clue. When he walks out that door, it's going to be a wild world out there.
Mhm.
And so we're totally missing the bucket as far as I'm concerned, the penal system. Because imagine the culture shock. Now, when do they come back? At least that's known.
So the guy that you visit, I mean, he spent about half his life incarcerated, and that kind of
As a
formative,
child, he
that
was
formative part of his
16.
life. Yeah.
His brain wasn't even fully functioning
Right.
yet.
And so how is he going to function outside of that system? Yeah. I'm glad you can do that work and support him in some way.
But writing is definitely therapeutic, and it's a good avenue, good way to actually discover yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And when all you got is time.
Yeah, my Shane, who wrote a couple of the poems here, that's what he would do in his cell. He would stay in his cell and he would write and write and write and write. That helped him get through it,
I guess, and I hope that people will pick up this book, but looking through it, you've got you've got whole chapters about individual poets, it looks like, and then and then it's published by the University Press of Kansas. And have you been in touch with some of these folks lately? How have they reacted to the book and to having their experience documented and validated like this?
So for For the most part, they're really pleased about it. Like Shane is so happy that he's got his poems out there, you know. So in writing the book, I had to be very careful about names and I had to make sure that the names that I used, that I was given permission to use them, because some people do not want to have a poem in a prison anthology because they don't want people to know that. But Shane was very proud of his work, and he was quite happy for me to use his name. The best writer that we had in the program over my 20 years of teaching there, Antonio, he died about a year ago in March 2021. He had a lot of health problems. He was only 46. And so we lost him, and that's like a huge loss for everything that we were trying to do. But for the most part, the guys that I talked to, they were just really pleased to be given the the prestige of having their work out there and being read by other people. It something that they had never imagined, and that was one of the best parts of what I did.
It's a good illustration of the one line of the one poem, taking a beautiful mess. How did it go? A beautiful mess and making a beautiful.
Yeah, that's what the guy wrote in the last class, wasn't it? Trying to turn a beautiful disaster into a beautiful song, he said. Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to find your book, where would they find it?
So the University Press in Lawrence, and it's on Amazon. So it's available.
Yeah, and we do have a copy circulating here at the library. I'm holding it up, but the camera's not pointed at me. So, but anyway, yeah. Thank you so much. I guess. Lori asked it. I see. Did medium security cut the Lucky Dog program in Hutch? You know about anything about that?
I am not sure. Someone else has asked. I should find that out. I know there are still dogs on the campus. I don't know if specifically the Lucky Dog program is still in existence.
This is rescue dogs.
Yes, and then the men, a pod of about 4 to work together and train the dog.
Yeah, those are great programs.
And in the past, they would get adopted out.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that might be the question, if that's currently happening.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And we talked about where to find the book, and then also again to Offender Victim Ministries, or you go Google OVM Newton and click on the website there, and you can get in touch with Todd and that group. Thank you, ma'am, for volunteering for that. It seems like a great thing, and hopefully some more people will get involved. So with that, I'll go ahead and let me see. I'm not missing anything, am I? No, it looks like not. So with that, I'll go ahead and sign off the live stream and the Zoom room. So Lori says she was part of the Lucky Dog program. Well, good for you, Lori. Lori, it's O-V as in Victor, M, O-V-M, Newton is what you can Google. So yeah, all right, signing off. Goodbye, everybody.